welcome everyone to Election Countdown Conversations. And it usually takes a little time for people to file in. So I'll go ahead and wait for people to sort of come into the room here. Want to thank everyone for joining us today. We are getting close to the election, hence our name, Election Countdown Conversations. And that's definitely true in this case. I can't believe it's coming up. So, okay, it looks like we have more people joining. Welcome. And in just a minute, we'll get going with a short introduction about who we are and what we're doing and why, and our guests. So it looks like we have almost, all right, we have launch off. So Michelle, why don't you kick off a little intro here?
Yeah. We are the Society of Heart's Delight, or 缘社 in Chinese. 缘社 is a growing community of Chinese immigrants who moved to America as adults, so that it could be a few years, or it could be more than 20 or 30 years living in America. Our focus is on creating unique opportunities for Chinese professionals in diverse fields to engage with local life and culture, contribute to the public good using our own voice, and feel a sense of belonging while having fun. My name is Michelle. I'm the founder of 缘社, and I will be one of your hosts today.
And my name is Pat, and I'll also be one of your hosts today. I'm originally from San Jose, California, and I lived in China for close to 7 years. And that's where I met Michelle. For most of that time, I was working for the University of Washington. And part of my job was to help Americans sort of acclimate to life and culture in Chengdu, China. So I'm passionate about sort of those spaces in between and how we can bridge that gap and, be closer to one another. I love living in China, and I still consider Chengdu to be my second home.
We believe that learning about politics at every level, having sincere conversations, and listening with an open heart is a good thing for everyone in our society. Our focus is on getting to know our political leaders, understanding more about the different roles in the government, what politicians actually do, and how they make decisions. Keep in mind that we are not a political organization, and each individual has a right to vote for their candidates of choice.
And this is the finale of our online civics mini-series called Election Countdown Conversations. This is our fourth interview. We've had 7 elected officials, political leaders. We're so lucky that we've been able to do that. Today we're focusing on city governance in the city of San Jose, which is the 3rd largest city in the US and the 10th largest third largest in California and the 10th largest in the United States. The city of San Jose is home to more than 63,000 Chinese Americans, according to the 2010 census, comprising 6.7% of the city's population. We are honored and so excited to have 2 very special guests joining us. Both of them are in our very own voting district, Mayor Sam Liccardo and City Council member Deb Davis.
Good evening. Thanks for having us.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having us, Pat and Michelle. Good to be with you.
Now, because you probably don't want to brag too much about this part, Michelle and I are going to each read one short paragraph about how excellent you are. So Michelle starts with Deb Davis here.
Deb Davis is a member of San Jose City Council, representing District 6. She assumed office in 2017, and she's currently running for re-election in 2020. Before becoming an elected official, Council member Deb Davis spent 12 years as an education researcher for Stanford University's Center for Research on Education Outcomes. Deb has a bachelor degree in economics and a master's degrees in public policy and education policy, organization leadership from Stanford University.
And Sam Liccardo grew up in San Jose, California. He holds a BS from Georgetown University and an MS in public policy and a JD from Harvard University. Liccardo's professional experience includes working as a prosecutor of sexual assault and child exploitation crimes in the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office and as a federal prosecutor. Before being elected mayor, Liccardo also served on the San Jose City Council. Mayor Liccardo was elected mayor in November of 2014, and his current term ends in 2023. Please feel free to correct anything if we got any of that wrong, by the way.
That's all pretty good.
It's all right for mine.
Okay, excellent. So we just want to start because, you know, in this current political climate, there's so much, so many people talking and saying things about other people. And I really feel it's so important for us to get to know our political leaders as human beings and to kind of know more about their stories and how they arrived at this point in time and where they are. So can each of you share a bit about your personal stories and sort of how you entered into public service? Did you have people or experiences in your life that influenced your decision? Let's start with Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. And thanks again, Pat and Michelle, for having us tonight. I honestly think it goes back to when my parents became foster parents and I started learning about kind of the role of government in kids' lives, because I had foster siblings who were around my age. I think I was 12 at the time I had my first foster sibling, and just, you know, I didn't know anything about how government worked and how it really could influence daily life, even for kids. So that got me interested in government and wanting to make a difference. And then I was lucky to have in 8th grade 2 very influential teachers, one who taught government and one who taught religion. I went to Catholic school, and they both were just very influential in helping guide me into my interest in policy. And then fast forward through to getting my undergraduate degree and doing research in the field of economics, but specializing in education because my mom was a teacher, and learning about education policy and influencing it that way. And then I had my own kids and really learned about how local government impacts families, and especially in, you know, budgetary crises as we had in kind of the early 2010 timeframe when my kids were much younger, and we were using the parks and the libraries on a very regular basis, and those services were getting cut because of the budget issues at that time. So that's really what propelled me into local politics. But I was always interested in politics and policy, just from different angles over the course of my adolescence and adulthood.
That's great. And you actually bring up a really good point about the connection. Really, a lot of people don't realize how, when you vote locally, how that impacts your life in a very real and tangible way. So at any time during this conversation, if you see those connection points or something tangible you want to point to, please do, because that's something that that I think our audience would be really interested in. So
great.
And Mayor Sam, what's your story?
Yeah, I was enjoying Deb's story, actually. So, you know, I can't say I know the exact moment. It was always intuitive for me that I wanted to go into public service somehow. And I think my family just so often reinforced that we were so fortunate in this country to have all the benefits we did, particularly of education, that there was just an expectation that no matter what we did, we were going to be doing something that would give back in some way in the community. And I remember, actually, when you mentioned the stuff about Harvard, it reminded me of this conversation I had with my grandfather, who had like an 8th grade education. And I think so many of us, you know, who are 1 or 2 generations away from the immigrant experience, you know, very typical immigrant experience here, 8th grade education, and worked incredibly hard, supported his family. And I remember being so proud telling him I got him to Harvard Law School. And because I knew how much he valued education, how important it was for my dad to go to school, and I remember just waiting for him to praise me, and he didn't say a word. And I remember being so incredibly disappointed. I was like, Grandpa, check it out. I got in. And he just sat down, and, you know, in his Italian Brooklyn accent, he said, hey, look, you need to understand something. A lot of the folks who go to places like that, they think it's about them, that they got into those schools, and you need to understand it's not about you, right? You got there because you had a lot of teachers who worked very hard, sacrificed for you. You had mother worked 3 jobs when your dad was going to college, your grandmother who was working, waking up at 4 a.m. to help me open a store. Everybody worked so hard to get you here. You need to understand it's not about you. And that was just a lesson I heard over and over as a kid. And so it just became kind of implicit in all that was, hey, this life you choose, it better be about someone other than yourself.
Great. That's very inspiring. Great. And we're going to sort of move into sort of the role and structure of city government. And this, because this is a civics focus, just some of those basic things that some people might not be aware of. So,
yeah. So my first question for Council Member Deb Davis, can you help us to understand what you do as a city council member? What are your responsibilities, and what does a typical day look like for you?
Even though that's changed now because of COVID, what did a typical day used to look like? And maybe,
A typical day right now is I sit in my garage in front of this computer.
With a green screen, right?
With either this on my ear, which is my phone, or in front of a Zoom. But it changes. Our Tuesdays are like this, the weird day of the week, because that's always blocked off for city council meetings, and it takes all day. We start at 9:30 for and we go until sometimes past midnight. So that's what, and that has become typical during COVID. We used to get out at 8:30, and it was exciting in retrospect to get out at 8:30. But other than that, we are focused on the core services of the city: police, fire, roads, parks, library, and other infrastructure. Those are the things that city council is, in charge of, and we set the policy and the budgets for those departments. We also have a housing department, and we also have an airport, which is different for our city than for other cities. Some other cities, they don't have their airport as part of the government, and they have a separate body for that. So we set the policy for those things and the budget. And most of my other days of the week are spent reading materials that staff puts out, getting briefings from different department heads or directors, and really kind of just responding to what residents' questions are and funneling information when residents bring up information. We have such a large city, it's really sprawling. And I'm sure Sam knows exactly the number of square miles. I can never remember it. It's big. See, I knew he would know. And so we really need residents to be involved. And I'm lucky to have one of the more involved districts. So a lot of residents contact us and let us know about different problems that have arisen that we wouldn't know about otherwise. And then we respond to them. And then I have a staff as well that helps, shuttle information back and forth between the different departments and our residents. So that's kind of like a typical day. And then with COVID, Sam and I put forward a proposal to do an alfresco program so that businesses could reopen outside and open more quickly.
We are going to get into that more specifically later. Yeah.
Good. All right. So that's the teaser. I won't even say.
Perfect teaser.
Yeah, we've been helping individual businesses to connect with the city and to be able to reopen and have space in our public spaces. So that's one thing that's been taking up, been more typical lately.
Okay, great.
I do need to correct one thing Deb said. She actually has the most engaged district in this city by far. And they yell because they love, but they definitely get engaged. And really a testament to Deb, because it takes an enormous amount of courage to do the right thing when there are folks that are pretty animated. And I say, I'm not exaggerating. And time and time again, Deb has stood up. For example, when plenty of council members have said, I really don't want that homeless housing site in my district, Dev has always stood up and said, no, we're going to do it. We believe in getting our homeless residents housed. I know there's going to be a lot of anger. I know there's going to be frustration. We're going to work through it. We're going to listen to people. We're going to work with the neighborhoods, but we're going to do it because it's what we need to do. And it takes a lot of courage to represent a district like that and still do the right thing.
Absolutely. And
we know it. We are in her district, so
we see it firsthand.
Yeah.
And also we interviewed a candidate for Santa Clara County Supervisor Otto Lee, who used to be the mayor of Sunnyvale, and it came out that like in some cities, city council members are not paid. It's not a full-time position, but in the city of San Jose, it is. Is that correct?
Yes, it is a full-time position.
Probably more than full-time. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in Dev's district, yes. You're downtown or Dev's district, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And speaking of sort of kind of panning out to the overall structure of government, city government in San Jose, for Mayor Sam, I know, you know, this has come up before about the two different forms of city governance. And I don't want to label it. I'd rather you speak to that and sort of explain what model do we have in the city of San Jose? What are the advantages and disadvantages, and what was the controversy over that change there?
Oh yeah, well, this will get boring really fast, so I'll try to describe it quickly. Nobody nods off in the middle of this thing, but for an overwhelming majority of cities in this country, there tend to be small towns and, you know, mid-sized cities. You have what's called city manager form of government for the most part. Council shows up once a week and votes, but for the most part, you have a full-time city manager who runs the show. Everybody reports to the city manager, and the city manager is the boss. And the city manager can get replaced by the council, but for the most part, everybody knows who's in charge. At the other end of the extreme, and I guess the closest example would probably be San Francisco. You have what's called a strong mayor system, where a mayor gets elected and the mayor makes, you know, 1,000 different appointments or a few hundred appointments in the city. And so everybody reports to that mayor and the mayor is in charge. And there may be a city administrator or city manager who gets appointed, but ultimately the mayor has the hire and fire authority. So San Jose is something of a hybrid in the middle, and there's lots of different variations, but we tend to lean more toward that older variation that you tend to see in smaller cities. Big cities tend to have stronger mayors. And it's something that's evolved over time. In the 80s, we had some changes that added some authority. And we considered doing that this year. What we decided ultimately to do is to kick it off to a commission to consider it and come back in 2 years, and then we'll go to the voters and vote about it. And for the most part, you know, there's no question any mayor would love to be able to have the ability to say, hey, we're going to do this and actually be responsible and accountable for that. But, you know, what I found is that, you know, particularly working through ballot measures and so forth, you can exert a lot of ultimate influence in outcomes that matter to people as a mayor, regardless of what form of government you're in. And, you know, I'll give you a quick example. Measure T is something I think that several of us were working on to try to do something to repave a lot of streets that have been neglected for 2 decades and preserve Coyote Valley, invest in a lot of infrastructure we critically needed. And I remember in that conversation that Dev and I had, just as we were considering, Dev said, hey, you've got to get Fire Station 37 in here. So Fire Station 37 was this fire station that in Willow Glen that planned to get built for 20 years, and it just languished and nobody had the money and nobody could figure out how to do it. And so we had this giant black hole, and it meant we weren't responding to people as quickly for emergency medical response and for fire and everything else throughout a large part of Willow Glen. And Dev said, look, if you're gonna get this measure on the ballot, you got to get the station. I said, okay, I get it. So, you know, those are the kind of things you can do by going directly to the voters. You know, you bypass the bureaucracy. You don't have to go through the red tape. You just say, voters, either you want this or you don't. And, you know, as mayor, I feel privileged that we've been able to do things like that.
That's great.
And have the neighborhood streets in there too. So that's a big deal for Measure T.
Yeah, a lot of street.
Fire Station 37 already broken ground last month, and we get all the neighborhood streets get to be repaved in the next 10 years. So that's a huge,
that's great.
Measure T was a huge win for sure.
So when you see your streets fixed, just think of Councilmember Davis and Mayor Liccardo. Okay, excellent.
Some people want me to actually, you know, fill the pothole myself and, you know, but we'll get it done eventually.
I think traffic engineers are a better, better crew for that.
So what do you think makes a good council member and a good mayor, each of you? If you can, in a nutshell, what do you think is what makes someone good at those roles?
I think the ability to listen before leading is the key. And that's something that I relearn all the time.
Not easily.
I thought I knew, I didn't know. So we need to, it's really important to be able to listen and then lead.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I would just offer, if there's something more to say, it would be, they say you often have to have a thick skin in this business because you're never going to make everybody happy. And that's just the way it goes. A favorite professor of mine used to say that leadership is about allocating pain, which is a really awful way to describe it. But we're going into tough budget discussions. That means cuts have to be made, and those are difficult decisions. It goes back to, I think, what the conversation I had with my grandfather many years ago, which is you just have to constantly realize it's not about you. Like if whatever you're doing, if it's about you, then it's probably the wrong decision. And if somebody's praising you for something wonderful you did, the reality is you didn't really do it. A lot of other people did it too. A lot of other folks are working really hard on it. And they're probably not praising you for you. They're praising you for the fact they finally got the street paved. And if they're blaming you, they're blaming you because they're upset about a lot of things, like the economy is horrible and there's not a lot you can do about that fact other than try to get out of the way and help small businesses get on their feet and all those things. So you just have to recognize you do your best and that it's not about you. Okay.
Those are really
good spirit
for anyone aspiring to public office. It's not about you, and listen first. Okay, so great. And
so, ask the next question.
Yeah. So before we get into the more specific topics, we're going to do a couple rapid fire questions for each of you. One word answers.
Rice or noodles?
Ooh.
I'm a noodle guy. I'm allergic to rice. Sorry.
Okay.
So I prefer noodles, but lately I've been having to eat rice.
Okay. And yeah. On a scale from 1 to 10, how spicy do you like your food?
Ooh.
9.
Wait a second. I gotta ask a clarifying question. Is 10 Thai spicy? Or is 10 like
10 is the spiciest you can imagine, I guess.
Okay, then I would have to go with like 7.
Because I
ordered Thai spicy one time. Like they were like, no, do you want like really spicy, like Thai spicy? And I was like, yeah, of course. And I could not eat it.
Wow. Yeah. Well, the part of China where I lived, that's known as like the spicy food part of China. So I definitely built up my tolerance, and maybe sometime we'll test you out there.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, very spicy.
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, my next question is for Deb Davis. One of your second-term goals is to support the implementation of San Jose housing crisis work plan to provide 25,000 new housing units by 2023. You also focus on the need for affordable housing and fighting homelessness and its impacts. Can you talk more about this?
Yeah, so we have been able to do a couple of new projects are kind of happening right now. One of them is on Evans Lane, and it's an interim housing site for homeless families who are vulnerable to COVID. And what's been really great about that site, it's a very large site, and we were able to designate 1/3 of it for this interim housing and have the other 2/3 be where we can put permanent housing at the same time that we have interim housing on the other part of the site, so that we can build more dense housing. Because when you do interim housing, it's all single story, but really that site can handle much taller buildings. So we're going to be able to do interim housing and permanent housing on the same site. That's just one example of kind of the way that we've been thinking about housing homeless people, but also providing that pathway for many more people to be in affordable housing. And then the second part about that particular site is something that's becoming at least a model for my district, is when we're doing homelessness housing, we're also creating a neighborhood community advisory committee, as we call it, a CAC. But they're really neighborhood focused for the businesses and the neighbors who live nearby and the new neighbors who will be living at the site and the service provider, and all getting together on a regular basis with city staff and talking about how it's going and what needs to change and how, and it really has built community. We were able to pilot it with the Bascom Community Center, hosted an overnight warming location starting last winter and going through August, as it turned out, because of the pandemic. Usually it's only in the winter months. But that was a really great way to bring people together and really to have the neighborhood be really invested in the project and its success.
Yeah, so there's committees. That's one way that people can get involved. And
Yes.
if perhaps if you or anyone on your staff have something they'd like to send, I'd be happy to share it with our audience about different ways people can sort of have a voice in some of these really important local decisions.
Great.
And also reach out to different offices when they have. And during this conversation,
Can I embellish? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, if anything comes up where you're like, oh, that is something that people can reach out to a city council member or to the mayor about, I think people don't really know when or how to reach out to different local elected.
Yeah, I think the rule is if you're unhappy about something, call your council member. But if you're happy, call your mayor.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to embellish on something that Deb said, because this is really important. I think what she has started, it should be a national model, which is she started these house. Typically you go house to house to have these community gatherings when you're running for office, right? And you talk to a group of 25 neighbors in a room. And she was doing this purely about the homelessness challenge.
Yep.
And what it would take for neighbors to feel comfortable having a mid-rise homeless housing project built in their neighborhood. What would it take? How can we do it safely? How can we do it in a way that, and having those conversations is so critically important to force people to get beyond their initial fears, to get into the actual dialogue, so that government can be more responsive. And I think it's worked incredibly well, what I've seen so far in her district. And I'm hoping that other council members adopt it. I think a couple have already stolen your idea a little bit.
Well, we're happy to make everything available. So those homelessness small group discussions were really, we had been doing them before the pandemic, most of 2019. And they really were, I think, the impetus for the CACs for when the project actually came, because we were having.
Can you say what CACs are?
The community advisory committees.
Okay, thank you.
So before we have a project, we have these homelessness small group discussions, and they're open. I'm happy if anyone wants to host one, we can do them on Zoom. We're talking about restarting them. And there's a whole presentation about everything that we're doing, city, county, nonprofits, to address homelessness. And that's to Michelle's question, that's how we're supporting the community plan to end homelessness, is to have start with these discussions. And really it's a hypothetical question. What if there was a project in your neighborhood? What would it look like? And if it was successful? And then we go from there. And then when we have the project, then we've already people have already discussed what and can envision what success would look like. And then we try to make that happen together with the neighborhood.
Actually, one of our viewers is in District 3, and this viewer said that that their city council member, Mr. Raul Perales, received huge backlash in his own district when he was sort of taking on some of that burden, as they're calling it, the homelessness. So this viewer is asking both Deb Davis and also Mayor Sam, what. If you're also committed to sort of taking on some of that burden, these are the words of the viewers, to follow that, and sort of those more affluent districts to take more responsibility. How would you answer that viewer?
Yeah, let me actually beat Deb to the punch on this one, because Deb has really been, I think, more than any other council member, shown an incredible amount of backbone in standing up and saying, yes, we're going to take our share. And by our share, meaning we all have a responsibility to try to solve this homelessness crisis. And that means even though I may have a lot of affluent residents, and she has a diverse community in her district, but there are certainly affluent residents who may occasionally feel more entitled, who may be more vocal. She still continues to stand up. That is a very difficult thing to do. I used to represent the downtown district where Councilmember Raul Perales now is, and he has also done a very good job in standing up. I can't say that's true about all of my colleagues. I think it is a little easier to do in downtown because I live downtown, and as urban residents, we have a higher tolerance for high density housing, for the realities of urban life. Every day we have something interesting happen in my neighborhood. That's just the way it is when you're downtown. I don't think that's true in most of the rest of the city. And so it really takes a lot of backbone. And specifically what Dev's done on 2 sites in particular, where there's been a lot of very vocal discussion. And I know they just finished a couple senior affordable housing developments in her district over by Deardown Station. Again, it takes a leadership at the council level, or else the stuff doesn't get started.
And I saw something also about a low-income LGBTQ housing project that's being planned for District 6, Dev. Is that true?
Yes, we have 2 now that are in the works, and it's a race to see which one will actually break ground first. So there's one that we've been talking about since actually 4 years ago, since even before I was a council member, that is on Race Street, and it's kind of where the old fish market is, if any of you know that spot. And there will be family housing as well as senior housing on that site. And we've been working with the Billy DeFrank Center to make sure that that is a welcoming space for LGBTQ families and seniors. And then there's another one on the Alameda that's just starting to be discussed, and that will also be for LGBTQ seniors.
But both locations are pretty close to us.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they are.
And I know you've done stuff with vet, and there's just not enough time to talk about all the stuff you've done. And actually, this next question is for Mayor Sam. Sort of everyone has been talking about working together to find solutions after COVID-19 hit. And one example that I see that's really stands out at the city level is an initiative that you and Councilmember Davis worked on together called Alfresco. So can you tell us about that initiative, how it came about? And I'm really interested, can you kind of paint a picture for our viewers about what it looks like for a mayor and a city council member to work together on an initiative from idea through to implementation?
Wow. Well, Deb's usually the one with the really good ideas. And so I just nod my head obediently. This one, we've actually seen evidence. With that?
You're being too modest. That is so not true.
We'd actually seen evidence of this idea popping up in other cities. So we can't say we came up with this or anything like that. But, you think about, for example, in Dev's district, where you have Lincoln Avenue going right through with just a really wonderful, vibrant set of small businesses and a neighborhood set of surrounding neighborhoods, and how valuable it would be to be able to see more of that commerce happening outside, even beyond the pandemic. I think when the pandemic is gone, I think we're going to think a lot differently about this public space on sidewalks and parking spaces, and how that can all be repurposed in some way for something other than automobiles. Not that automobiles go on sidewalks, but that's another issue. So Deb was kind of all in, all from the get-go, because she's been very strong proponent of small business. And I think she is particularly clued into what's happening in the small business districts that she has that are pretty compelling, particularly in Willow Glen. And the real issue was, how could we get city staff to the point where they would not regulate this to death? And how do we get red tape out of the way so we can just say yes? And I think Deb was particularly effective, I think, in nudging some of the very good and hardworking people in City Hall, simply to say, look, we'll figure out the rules later. Let's just say yes now.
Wow. I mean, that's a big thing with zoning. I mean,
Yeah.
We all hear the stories about how difficult it could be to get things through. But I mean, I was also really surprised how quickly that sort of came up. What is it? Are there any updates on it, Deb, about how it's going, or what's the status on that?
Yeah, so we have, it's countless at this point. We call them parklets, or we used to call them parklets, where we take concrete barriers and block off the public parking on the street, and then restaurants can put tables out and do business there. And then in private parking lots, there's some beautiful spaces, and Alameda is doing it too, where they can have their businesses outside. And we really staff was really great when we made it clear that we wanted it to be easy. They said, okay, if they can do a web form and upload their insurance document, we'll call it a day. And so it's just been such a great response. We had a ton of businesses. We tried to reach out to individual businesses on the Alameda, on West San Carlos, and on Lincoln Avenue. And we've just had such a good response where people said, yeah, we want to do it. We're going to do it. And then you kind of have seen the result. We have, I don't know, on Lincoln Avenue, I was just there this weekend. I think there might be half a dozen new parklets, and there were already 2 on the street to begin with that had been through the old permitting process and everything. So, and they've done a great job in making them just gorgeous, like painting them and putting flower boxes on them and all kinds of stuff. So it's really made the street more vibrant. And I think it didn't help just the businesses that participate. It helps all the other businesses, even when retail was able to reopen, to have people out on the street and to see people, enjoying the public space and the fresh air. It made people, I think, more comfortable and willing to come down and resume as much normal activity as they could.
And if there's any small business owners in the audience, how should they look for that form to fill out?
So sjeconomy.com is probably the easiest website to go to, and you look for alfresco, and there's a form that they can fill out to do that. And basically you just have to follow the directions, and then you can go forward and do it. It's not like an inspection process or anything like that.
Small businesses are so important for our city. So
could I just throw out one other resource that may be helpful? Actually, for all kinds of things that are COVID related, which is SiliconValleyStrong.org, has a lot of the information and links that Deb referred to. So either way, we'll get you to some of that on small businesses, but also has lots of information about where people can go, for example, to find food that's being distributed in sites throughout the city, to be able to get help understanding where testing is, all kinds of things. So SiliconValleyStrong.org.
Great, very helpful.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So my next question is for Deb Davis. You worked on lots of initiatives and you use data to make decisions. Can you talk a bit about this process? How do you collect and use data in your role as city council member?
Yeah, so it's a lot different from when I was a researcher, I'll tell you that. As a researcher, I was the one collecting raw data and doing the analysis and writing the reports or doing the studies. And now I'm the one using the studies. So I have a wonderful staff, and each person on my staff kind of specializes in one or 2 areas. So for example, Serena on my staff is my housing specialist. And when housing, big housing questions come up, potential big changes, she goes and does the research and then helps provide me with the research. And a lot of times now with housing, we've been doing that for a long time, and we kind of have a sense of where we go and what the search terms are. But I like to know if we're not breaking new ground and we're doing a replication of policies that have been put in place elsewhere, how did they work out? I think it just makes sense to say, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, we have this wonderful internet that has all the information we could possibly want at our fingertips. So we need to use it when we're making policy so that we can say, oh, well, they did this over, over here in Texas, for example, and it didn't work out, but a little tweak that they did in Arizona worked great. And so then you kind of can put things together, and then that's really where the detail of the policy can make or break the success, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever looked at data and had it completely like just change your thinking on something?
I'm sure I have. I try to go into these without any preconceived notions and just look at the studies and ensure that they're quality studies. And that's something that I have a background in that. So it's a little bit easier for me to say, well, this is not the kind of data that I'm looking for. Not the study wasn't done in a rigorous fashion. So I try not to go in with preconceived notions and kind of let the data, but also my gut tell me where we should go.
I wish we all had those skills, right? We more than ever, but
I wish we just had a government with those skills, honestly. I mean, I don't think I've seen a single econometric study since I left grad school at City Hall. I mean, we could definitely use more of that. And I'm grateful that Deb has those skills, because we need to do more of it in all levels of government.
Great. And the next topic is a big one. It's sort of the Google complex coming, and the Google campus. And, and we even had one of our viewers asking about this as well. But I'd like to start sort of at the bigger sort of panned out level first for Mayor Sam. Sort of, do you have any updates about it? And also, what do you want to say to the people that are too far on one side or the other side? Like, what would you say? What would you say to the people that are really strongly opinionated, way off on one side and way off on the other side, to give them a different way to think about this?
Yeah, I think what I'd say to folks on both sides is obviously this is really important and impactful for the city, but I think perhaps the impact occasionally gets overstated, and by that, whether it's good or bad. And by that I mean, the campus has been described as something that would attract 60,000 Google employees, maybe more than that, by the way. But for one thing, 20,000 Googlers are not going to descend from the sky on day one. This is over a time of a decade or more when this gets built out. And for a city the size of 1 million, as you have in San Jose, more than 1 million, adding 20,000 Google employees to a city of 1 million over a period of 5 years or 10 years, that doesn't even match, even a blip of what our standard employment growth would be over any one given year. So, yeah, I think whether you love Google or hate it, I guarantee it won't be quite as impactful as you might imagine. On the other hand, where I think it's really critical for us is in placemaking. And Deb has been such a great leader in this and really trying to see how we can create a vibrant urban village there, which is so different from, frankly, the rest of Silicon Valley. We're all trapped in our cars in a lot of traffic, wasting too much of our lives looking at the red lights in front of us, and not in a community where we can walk to stores, to services, to work, to be able to engage in public spaces, parks and plazas and paseos in ways that that when we think of great cities and what we love about them, right? And it's the experience we have as a pedestrian. It's what we see from the ground level. We don't experience great cities moving 50 miles an hour chained to our steering wheel. And so we have an opportunity to really begin to retrofit this city that's been built for an automobile into a city built for people. And Google's going to make a major investment to do that. And it's not just the jobs, of course. It's 5,000 units of housing. 4,000, I believe was the latest. 4,000 units, 1,000 which must be rent restricted, affordable. So that's extraordinary. No company would ever say that's their line of work, but they're doing it. And they're committing unbelievable amounts of resources to build that infrastructure and to commit to all kinds of community initiatives around education and job training for construction trades and so forth. So I think this is going to be fantastic for the community. Unabashed supporter, and I'm grateful that Dev has been such a great champion for this. But I should warn people that, as I say, it's not going to be it's not going to dramatically change our employment picture in the city.
That's funny because one of our viewers said, what is your view on bringing the benefit of the Google complex, not only to the immediate neighborhood, but also to other areas in like downtown, like St. James Park and the area near Highway 280. So I do think there seems to be, there's almost like, okay, Google's coming to save us or Google's coming to destroy us.
Yeah.
And the truth is probably not either one. So
yeah, we'll be fine either way. All right, one way or another. I'd like for it to happen. We'll be fine either way. But to go to that question, like St. James Park, for example, which has always been a challenge in this city for decades, and the environment there. And what we'd like to do is to be able to build what would be a really transformative pavilion, a music pavilion there, open air in St. James Park, and to have a company like Google in downtown that would say, hey, we're invested enough in this place. We'll participate in that. We'll support it. That is what Google really brings, is being able to invest in a city to make really wonderful civic assets happen.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people are looking again like it's on the outside, and they forget that you can get involved, and there's lots of great local organizations like Spur and other opportunities to voice your opinion on these things. So Deb, do you have anything to add to that?
The Levitt Pavilion they have a group that is working on that, and that they're always looking for people to get involved with that because it's such a big project. It's been going for multiple years since it's been proposed. They had a visioning process and they're doing fundraising. And then when the pavilion actually gets built, they'll need to program it and do, I think they're wanting to do like 50 events a year. So basically one a week, and probably more in the summer. So there are tons of ways, even just that one thing, there are a bunch of ways to get involved in that. We have a lot of other, kind of speaking of parks, we have a parks commission, and we have many commissions at the city, and they advise the city council and really provide a public space for people to get involved as commissioners, but also to learn about the new things that are happening. And frankly, the commissioners get to hear about things before they come to council. So those are great ways to be able to get involved. And the San Jose City website has all the open commissions. We have one for the airport. We have one for the library and education. We have one for parks. There are tons of them. So pretty much anything you're interested in the city, there's a commission for it. And there's even a neighborhoods commission, which encompasses so many other, so many areas. And so that's one great way for people to get involved. I was on a commission before I became a city council member, and it was a really good way to learn about how the city ran and what the process was for city staff to take even, budget items to the city council and kind of how that all worked.
Great. And if anyone from your staff wants to shoot any of those resources, or I just bullet point, I can put it in when we post this video in our YouTube channel.
Great.
We have our YouTube channel at the Society of Hearts Delight. So we'll put that all in the description of the video. Mm-hmm. And Michelle has.
Yeah. So. Well,
oh, sorry. Yes.
So my next question is for Deb Davis. Yeah, you've talked about your focus on economic policy and education, stating that you believe that these two areas of public policy address the root cause of a lot of problems cities face. What do you mean by that?
And I know that we're close to running out of time, so that's like a
big question for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
No, I think the disparities in education resources and education outcomes, not only in this city but across our country, across economic, socioeconomic factors, it is the single biggest possible leveler of the playing field, and so we don't run this. I don't know if your audience knows, but the city doesn't actually run the schools in San Jose or in the entire state of California, the system is set up differently. So the school boards run the schools, and those are independently elected. So when you're looking at your ballot, you'll see area trustees for different school boards. But we've been able to partner with the school districts, and Sam has been actually fantastic in helping the library become partners with different school districts so that we could help bridge the digital divide, which is something that is so necessary in education, even pre-pandemic. We had this going before the pandemic, and now, of course, it becomes crucial to be connected, because that's how everyone is getting their schooling. So that's kind of how education is so important, because if you get a good education, as Sam said, you have to have all those people supporting you to be able to get a good education so that you can then give back. And that's really kind of what it's all about, right? We're all in this together.
Well, and I know that you are running for re-election, and if you had to summarize sort of what makes you different than your opponent, how would you summarize that?
Well, the biggest difference is I have the experience, and I've lived in San Jose as an adult and a parent with children, and knowing viscerally how government impacts a family's daily life is really kind of the biggest difference. And
Mayor Liccardo, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, she's better. She's better. No, and going back to that education thing, those disparities are so deep and they're so challenging. And Deb's been a huge champion supporting an effort to, we've invested about $10 million just in the last 7 months on this digital divide issue to try to address. And the good news is, working with Eastside Union High School District and distributing nearly 16,000 hotspots, we've been able to get more than 100,000 residents in the city of San Jose connected to free Wi-Fi. Wow. But the challenge is still greater than that. And even we know when kids do get online, we know low-income children aren't learning at the same rates as other children in distance learning. And so these are challenging issues, and we just have to go deep, and we need smart people like Deb to help us figure it out.
Great. Well, listen, I know that you are both very, very busy people, and I can't think of a better way to conclude our experiment here with this election countdown conversations. And the election is truly counting down at this point. So I hope all of you will get out and vote. And any quick closing thoughts about voting?
Yeah, so you can go to the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters website to find the ballot drop boxes. There are official ballot drop box locations, and many of them are at public libraries, so they're super easy to find. And then, of course, the biggest one and easiest one to find is the SAP Center. So you can always go there and drop off your ballot at the SAP Center.
Great, and we'll go through and write all those resources on the YouTube video that we'll post here in just a day or so. So thank you both so much. This has been beautiful memory for us. So
thank you, Pat. Thank you, Michelle. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, great. And good luck, how did you say, allocating all that pain or
Stay healthy, you guys.
Okay, you too. Stay safe.
Thank you so much.